So, Waite Omnes, it's Magister Compton again, and this is going to be our tour through the vocab for chapter 27. It's a pretty short list, but got some information for you that will be helpful to know. There might be some questions that come on the vocab quiz that will benefit those of you who have listened to this and paid attention. And for those of you who didn't pay attention and listen, well, you'll miss out on some of those questions. But let's get into it. So, our first word, civitas. So just like usual, I'm going to say it. I'll pause for a second, give you a chance to say it yourself. And we'll do that for each of the parts of the word. So first word, civitas, civitatis. And it's a feminine noun. So this is citizenship, citizenry, or state. And that's how we're going to use it. But be aware as you get into later Latin, the word also means city. So, for example, St. Augustine's great work, De Civitate Dei, was about the city of God, not the state or the citizenship of God. And it's got two parts to it. First is civis. We've known that word from the I stem chapter for citizen, but it's got this tas suffix. And so you'll see this a lot. They're always feminine, and it always has the sense of the quality of. So civitas is the quality of being a citizen, aka citizenship. And the spot in Italy where Pompeii used to stand was a big flat field after Vesuvius erupted and after time had gone on, and yet they still called the place La Civita, which in Italian means the city. So they knew that at some point a city had stood there and was no longer there. It wasn't until, the rumor is, a shepherd boy fell down a hole in the region and came into some buildings, and that's when they discovered there was a city there. So, but yeah, that's why that field area was called La Civita, because they knew there had been a civitas, a city there. Next word, homo. So I'll say it and you say it back. Homo. Hominis. And as you would expect, this is a masculine word because it means man or human being. And this is usually used for generic situations as in just like a human man or a human being. If you're talking about a specific man or you're talking about man as opposite of woman, you would still use wir. And we got some derivatives of this, got hominid, so anything that's a human-like being. We also see this in the genus name of all the different kinds of humans that have been throughout our evolutionary history. So we, of course, are Homo sapiens, the wise men, but you also have Homo neanderthalis, the Neanderthals, Homo erectus, the upright standing man, Homo habilis, the able man, so again, tool making and so on. And I think there's other homines types that are out there. Now, people hear the word homo and they assume it has something to do with same. That's the Greek prefix homo, not the Latin word homo. Okay? So homo hominis is a man. It does not mean the same. Next up, hortus. So our word here, hortus. Horti. And it's masculine, makes sense. It's a second declension noun. And it means garden. And we know this word because this was one of the parts of our house that we talked about last year, usually inside of the peristylium. And one important derivative of this is horticulture, which means the caring for a garden. So if you're a horticulturalist, you are focused on plants, especially the kind of plants one would put in a garden, like flowers or things like that. All right, next word is labor. So labor, laboris. And it is a masculine word. Odd because usually our traits words are feminine, but this one's masculine. The OR is a signal for that. Amor is another one that's masculine, and that means love. You'd think it'd be feminine, but the OR makes it masculine. And labor can mean difficulty or hardship. like something is laborious, it's difficult. But labor can also mean work, and that's the one that we're most familiar with. Makes sense. Um, Labor as work is just like general effort. This is different from work negotium, which is business work, or opus work, which is an actual product, like you create something. That's why um, composers, they're often said to have a magnum opus, a great work. So it's a product, it's not the act of working. This is related to the verb laboro, which means to work. So a lot of times nouns and verbs do connect to each other. And it's a cognate. So the word labor is labor in English. We also get words like laborious and so on from that. And labor was one of the great Augustan virtues. So when Emperor Augustus came to power, one of the things that he tried to instill in the Roman people is this idea that there are certain virtues, there are certain qualities that every good Roman should demonstrate. And labor, the desire to work, was one of them. One of the authors of Augustus's time, Virgil, he wrote this in one of his poems, labor omnia vincit, which means work conquers all things. Next is lex. So the word is lex, legis, and it is feminine. And lex means law. So lex was used for an individual written law, so like a piece of legislation. That's different from the word use, which also means law, but use is a kind of law, like a group of laws in a certain category. Use can also mean a right. So like the right of free speech would be use. And when you study Roman history, when you come across laws, it's always lex followed by the author's name in its feminine version, so with an A on the end of it. So an example here, the lex hortensia, his name is then turned into like a feminine adjective to modify lex, the Hortensian law. And so we know that this was a law written by a senator named Hortensius. And derivatives of this, we get legal, legislate, legislature. Basically, anything with leg in it that has to do with laws or lawmaking groups derives from lex. Next up, multitudo. So the nominative multitudo, multitudinous, and it is feminine. And a multitudo is a great number or a crowd. Makes sense because we know from the derivatives one that obviously stands for a crowd. The tudo suffix is a lot like tas, and again, it has the quality of. So in this case, it's the quality of being many, multi. So a multitudo. Just like we have the word fortitudo, the quality of being brave. And derivatives, multitude, we know that word. And multitudinous, so something that has many things in it. Next up, pars. So the nominative is pars. And then partis. And this is feminine. It's going to mean part, shocking, or direction. So your vocab list says directive. Please change that. It should say direction. Derivatives, obviously part comes from this. Partial, partition, all are derivatives of the word pars. And when we get to chapter 29, we're going to talk about this thing called a partitive genitive. And the word pars will be an important word for that chapter. So partitive, another derivative of pars. An example of that would be like this, pars urbis, a part of the city. So we're talking about a piece, which would be one case, and then what that is a piece of, the whole thing, would be in the genitive. In this case, it's a city. Next up is pes. So first of all, the nominative pes, pedis. And it is masculine, and it means foot, which you should know because this was one of our body parts words. We get from this pedal, pedestrian, You might be able to think of a few other ones that have PED in it. And the word pes derives from the word podos in Greek, which is where we get other words for foot, like podiatrist, which is a foot doctor, or orthopedic, which means a straight foot. A pseudopod, you might talk about that in biology class with amoebas, because they create these to move around. A pseudopod is literally a false foot. And an arthropod, so our friends like the ants and the spiders that have the exoskeletons, arthropod literally means a jointed foot. So those are all from Greek, but podos, the Greek word, eventually gives us pes. And lastly, we come to the word virtus. So virtus, virtutis. And this means manliness, bravery, or courage. Oddly enough, it means manliness, but it's a feminine noun because tus is a variant of tas, and so it's another one of those tas words like cupiditas. We've got that from Cupido, or kiwitas from earlier in this list. So virtus literally means the quality of being a man, or the manly trait. Now, this is very, very important. The word virtue derives from virtus, but virtue is not a definition of virtus. So if you were to write that down in a translation, I would mark it wrong. Virtus, when you encounter it in Latin, would mean bravery or courage, or if you want to say manliness, that's fine too. The word virtual also comes from this. So anything with AL on the end is the quality of being. So originally, virtual meant, the quality of being manly. Our modern use of it, like virtual reality, that came about in the 1950s, specifically 1959. So yes, the word virtual does derive from virtus, but it's a evolved meaning. We don't usually use the direct derivative of manliness as virtual anymore. All right, so that's it. That's your vocab list. You might see some questions about derivatives. You might hear some other questions about things that were mentioned on here on the vocab quiz. There'll be bonus questions, so extra points for you if you paid attention. Until later, Valete omnes.